What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie The Piano Lesson. Here's a quick synopsis. Two siblings, Bernice and Willie, debate what to do with a piano that has been in their family for decades and has deep meaning behind it. The film stars John David Washington, Danielle Deadwyler, Samuel L. Jackson, Ray Fisher, Michael Potts, and Corey Hawkins. Standout performances. My favorite actors are the ones who go back and forth between big studio movies and small dramas, and that's what John David Washington has done. Giant films like Christopher Nolan's Tenet and Gareth Edwards is the creator, and smaller, more emotional films like Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman and Sam Levinson's Malcolm and Marie. Washington in The Piano Lesson plays Boy Willie, who is very talkative and opinionated, and Washington has shown he can take over a movie when given stirring dialogue. You see it in Malcolm and Marie, and you certainly see it with this performance in The Piano Lesson. Up till now, John David Washington's biggest opportunity was in the movie Tenet, and the actor recently talked about being the first black lead of a Christopher Nolan movie, telling Deadline, quote, "I think what was so brilliant, which is one of the reasons I know Nolan is a real one, is because he didn't sensationalize it. He didn't say we're on the precipice of history or anything like that. He just said he's a man, he's the protagonist, I know who I picked." And I think that kind of thinking was what I was very excited about. Now, of course, I thought about it because first, I'm in a Nolan film, and yeah, there's a black dude with a beard on the cover. He's never done that before. So it was rock and roll, man. He was shaking up the industry with that hire to me. I was very aware of it and didn't take that kind of responsibility lightly, end quote. I first became impressed with Danielle Deadwyler on the Western film The Harder They Fall. She's an actress who's a real chameleon. Hard to believe it's the same person from The Piano Lesson. I know many view her as an underappreciated talent, and my take on that is, as long as she gives performances like the one she gives in The Piano Lesson, she will eventually be properly recognized. In The Piano Lesson, she plays Bernice, who feels real burden when it comes to her family's past, and she's very much afraid of history repeating itself. It's why she wants to avoid her brother. Deadwyler and Washington are two actors who have emerged through the last few years. Somebody who has been recognizable for decades now is Samuel L. Jackson. And I like when Samuel L. Jackson yells about snakes on a plane as much as the next guy. And I love the performances where he really goes for it. Pulp Fiction and Jungle Fever. But I also like it when he gives a more subtle performance. What he's doing is something you rarely see in The Piano Lesson, because in The Piano Lesson there are people having a heated argument, and what you expect out of Samuel L. Jackson is to be the loudest voice in said argument, and he's not. He is the voice of reason. What's so interesting about Samuel L. Jackson is we all have a history with him because of the Star Wars movies, because of the Avenger films. We all have our idea of who Samuel L. Jackson is as a performer. So when he does something outside of that, you almost have to take a minute to realize that. And I did with this movie, and I think what he's doing in this movie is really something special. And I do believe it's harder for him to give a performance like this than the ones he's most recognized for. There are two more supporting performances in The Piano Lesson that I have to talk about. I have yet to see a movie that has Corey Hawkins where he is not one of the standouts. He's gotten to this point where he's not given a whole lot of screen time, but is still put in crucial roles. I just rewatched BlacKkKlansman, a movie in which he's only in about one scene, and I was blown away by him. In The Piano Lesson, he plays Avery Brown, a preacher who is in love with Deadwyler's Bernice. And the last performance I want to talk about comes from Ray Fisher. Ray Fisher, like a lot of modern actors, has been swept up in comic book movies, playing Cyborg in Zack Snyder's DC films. In The Piano Lesson, he plays Lyman, who is a sympathetic character due to the fact that life has not gone the way he wanted it to. He desperately wants a fresh start. It's a really good supporting turn from Fisher. The biggest strength of this film, The Piano Lesson, is its strong ensemble. I mean, I just talked about 5 noteworthy performances. It's going to be hard to watch a movie in the year 2024 to find 5 performances that really impress you. What's shocking about the film is that it's made by a first-time director, Malcolm Washington, John David's brother. It's super well made, and I think most importantly, it's a good-looking film. And fair or not, that's how I'm judging movies nowadays. I look at a movie and I can instantly go, is this something I want my eyes to look at for the next hour or two? And with The Piano Lesson, it was a big yes. What's interesting to me about the plot of this movie is the idea that 2 siblings can come from the same family history and view that history in 2 completely different ways. One family member wants to use that past to improve the future, while the other sibling wants to hit the reset button. And depending on how you feel, I think audience members will choose which side they are on, because both characters make compelling cases as to what to do with the piano. And I, for one, think that's a sign that this is a very good movie, because a lot of other films would have made one side way stronger than the other. But the complexity of this film is that you are on the side of every character at one point. They all make strong cases as to what to do with this piano. It's worth noting that this is another film adaptation of an August Wilson play. Denzel Washington starred in Fences and has then gone on to produce Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and The Piano Lesson. I'm someone who really loved Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I thought the late great Chadwick Boseman was brilliant in that film. Viola Davis probably should have won an Oscar for that performance. And what I like about these adaptations of these August Wilson plays is they have a hint of comedy, but they also have serious subject matters underneath them, and you have that same feeling in The Piano Lesson. There are moments of real humor with John David Washington's character, like his own ambition is really funny at times. But like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, The Piano Lesson builds to something emotional at the end. One of the things I found very realistic about this movie was that no one in this family was in agreement on what exactly to do with this piano. And I think that's something that we all go through with our families. There is no clear thing. There is no clear leader. And the reason for that is because we all have differing opinions about our own family history. There is no real group think when it comes to most families. It's basically filled with individuals. And I think this movie represents that in a way that I found to be really honest. I don't want to spoil this movie. I do, however, want to talk about the 2 sibling characters and what they want to do with this family piano. So John David Washington's boy Willie wants to sell this piano so that he can better his own life and become his own man. Well, Deadwyler's Bernice wants no part of that, and she wants the men in her family to stop making these disastrous life decisions that are selfish. I would describe her character as practical, a realist, like she lives in the moment, while John David Washington's character is a bit of a daydreamer. And their 2 differing personalities are what makes this central conflict interesting. Look, there have been a lot of movies about slavery, some that I like, some that I don't like, but there have not been a lot of movies about what life was like immediately after a family was no longer enslaved. Like, what were they thinking about what the world was going to be and what the world was? And this movie gives you a glimpse into that. It gives you a glimpse into a family reeling with their past and thinking about the future. For me, this movie is also about how something can represent something to somebody and not somebody else. Like Deadwyler's Bernice clearly doesn't want to move on from this piano because she has deep feelings about it, while John David Washington's character just wants to sell it for a quick buck. But what's important about this movie, and I won't spoil it, is they begin to see each other's worldview about the piano and the impact that it's had on them. That's something that really gets me about this movie, that John David Washington's character comes out of nowhere after years away okay, thinking that he knows that his sister is going to be okay about him selling this piano. That is crazy, but also something that I find to be super realistic, because we all just assume that every single member of our family is on the same page as us about everything, because we take for granted that these people will have different views about everything, that they are individuals, that they are something outside of this group with her own opinion. I'm telling you, if you have siblings, I think you are really going to connect to the piano lesson, and you're probably going to view your siblings in a different way. Oscar chances. I no longer know how to view these Netflix releases. I don't know if this movie is a major Oscar contender. A lot of them emerge, like The Irishman gets nominated for a lot of awards, and then it ends up winning none of them. I don't know how to feel about a Netflix movie possibly winning Best Picture. Like, I know The Piano Lesson is not going to win Best Picture, but do I think it deserves to be nominated? Sure. Do I think that it has any chance of getting nominated? I don't know. There are 3 performances from this movie that I think deserve nominations, and they are John David Washington, Danielle Deadwyler, and Samuel L. Jackson. And I'll go through all 3 of them. It's time to nominate John David Washington for something. FYI, he should have been nominated for BlacKkKlansman. He has proven to be a really interesting leading man, and I really like the movies he's chosen to be a part of. Then you have Danielle Deadwyler, who many people believe should have gotten a nomination for her work in Till. Right now, I think she has the best chance of anyone from this movie getting a nomination. And then you have Samuel L. Jackson, who is thought of to be one of our great actors, but has not gotten a single acting nomination since Pulp Fiction. And yeah, I get it. You're not going to nominate Samuel L. Jackson for his work in the Star Wars movies or Avengers, but maybe you should have nominated the guy for both A Time to Kill and Django Unchained, 2 films that Jackson is brilliant in. What's really interesting about The Piano Lesson is when it was announced, everyone viewed this as like a prestige movie for Samuel L. Jackson, and then they saw the movie and they're reversing course. They're saying he's not going to get nominated for this film. And it all goes back to this idea that Samuel L. Jackson is giving a different kind of performance than the ones he's most famous for. That this isn't the version of Samuel L. Jackson you, the audience, wants. And to that I say, that's ridiculous. He is doing brilliant work in The Piano Lesson, and I would love to see him get his first Oscar nomination since Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. I recently heard Samuel L. Jackson talking about the fact that it's not an honor to get nominated. I mean, he's an actor who wants to win. I kind of think it's ridiculous that he's mad that Martin Landau won for Ed Wood. I mean, Martin Landau in Ed Wood is beyond brilliant. Yes, Samuel L. Jackson was great in Pulp Fiction, but I don't think he deserved to take home that award that year. And I think he should want an Oscar nomination. I mean, it's been so long. You've been doing a lot of studio movies. You should want to remind people you're a great actor beyond those movies. And if Samuel L. Jackson gets an Oscar nomination for The Piano Lesson, it would get more people to watch The Piano Lesson. This is something the Academy doesn't realize. I get it. Every year there's always like these 5 movies and they get all of these nominations, and there's like free acting nominations from one movie. I think you should spread the wealth out and nominate as many movies as possible in as many different categories so that people will go, oh, what is The Piano Lesson? I should go and watch this movie. And then they'll find out that The Piano Lesson is a brilliant movie in and of itself that probably should have gotten more awards recognition than it got. An Oscar nomination would give the movie more eyeballs, and that's the tricky thing with Netflix is we don't know if the movie needs more eyeballs. I have no idea how many people have seen The Piano Lesson. It's a movie that I wanted to talk about because it has actors in it I really like. John David Washington, Danielle Deadwyler, and Samuel L. Jackson. What's crazy is I have absolutely no feel about this movie in the culture. I would be equally surprised come Oscar nominations if Deadwyler and Jackson were nominated than if they weren't nominated. This gets me to Malcolm Washington. Now, it's hard for me to argue that he deserves a Best Directing nomination. Now, I do believe the Academy Awards should should come up with a category called Best First Feature. I mean, this is a masterclass on how to direct your first film. He has 5 performances. He lets everyone cook in the movie. Every actor is given a moment. You can have all the nepotism talk you want. I'm not interested in that. I am interested in seeing this guy's next movie. Like, he has become a filmmaker. I would definitely be interested in seeing his second feature and seeing if he can take his career to that next level, because he's gotten something really special out of The Piano Lesson. And that would be a surprising Oscar nomination I would love to see. Like, don't do something obvious. Nominate Malcolm Washington, who did a brilliant job making The Piano Lesson. I mean, that would surprise people. You would be gearing them to see a really good film. Another thing is, it's also how you make directors into big names. More people would be excited about Malcolm Washington's second feature if he's an Academy Award nominated director. That's why a little piece of me believes that Malcolm Washington could get a nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, because they love to give newcoming directors screenplay nominations. Jordan Peele got one, Greta Gerwig got one, Emerald Fennell got one, and Peele and Fennell won their screenplay nominations for their first film. I'm just throwing it out there that I would be irritated if come Oscar nominations morning, this film does not get major recognition either from the actors in it or the director of it. But getting back to the Netflix of it all, I think there are some people out there who believe that this movie is underseen because it's on Netflix, and I hate to tell those people, this movie, The Piano Lesson, would not fare much better in movie theaters. I mean, what would a movie like this make in 2024? I mean, could I even guarantee it to make 20 million domestically? Absolutely not. It's a talky drama with a serious subject matter. The movie is definitely getting the most possible eyeballs it could being on Netflix. The more interesting thing to talk about is, shouldn't the fact that John David Washington, the star of Tenet, and Samuel L. Jackson, one of the stars of the Star Wars prequels and the Marvel films, being in it, shouldn't that get more eyeballs in it? Shouldn't these big-time actors being in these big studio movies help a movie like this? And if they don't help a movie like this, why is that the case? Why doesn't John David Washington's fame resonate outside of Tenet the way that it probably would if we were living in the year 1998? I think it's one of the reasons people do not identify John David Washington as a movie star, because it's just so hard to be a movie star in 2024. You don't get eyeballs on movie to movie like you would back in the day. People are clearly not as interested in following the complete career of a movie actor anymore. And that's one of the reasons I would be so pleasantly surprised to wake up Oscar nomination day and find out that John David Washington was nominated for Best Leading Man for his part in The Piano Lesson, because it's something you would see. You would see an actor who did a big blockbuster, then test himself in a drama, and then he would get recognized for that. Now you're seeing less and less of that, because the people are not following him to that smaller drama the way that they would. Then you have Ray Fisher, who we've only talked about when it comes to these big studio movies. I mean, for years, I've only known as this guy as Cyborg from the Justice League movies, and all of the controversy that surrounded the Snyder Cut and all of that nonsense. And now we're just finding out that this guy is a legitimate actor who can be in a well-acted film like this. It's interesting to find out that people can be underserved in those bigger movies that everyone sees as well. Oscar nominations or no Oscar nominations, The Piano Lesson is definitely a film worth seeking out. John David Washington and Danielle Deadwyler do some of the best acting of their careers, and Samuel L. Jackson is doing something different, and you should want to see Samuel L. Jackson doing something different. Another recent Samuel L. Jackson performance I would highly recommend recommend comes from the film The Banker. This was a film from 2020 that also has Anthony Mackie and Nicholas Hoult. It's just a recent Samuel L. Jackson performance that I really enjoyed. The piano lesson is a well-needed reminder that not only is Samuel L. Jackson like a mythical figure, a great movie star, he's also a great actor as well. Also, last thing, I can't be the only person on planet Earth who wants this. I want a Spike Lee movie that stars John David Washington, Denzel Washington alongside Samuel L. Jackson. Give that to me immediately. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out The Piano Lesson. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Jesse Eisenberg's A Real Pain, starring Eisenberg alongside Kieran Culkin. So tune into that, and please rate, review, and subscribe.